Mace Windu should have died that day. Everyone thought he did. Palpatine thought he did. Vader thought he did. The entire galaxy watched the Jedi Master fall from that tower, blasted out by Sith lightning, his severed hand tumbling through 4,000 levels of Coruscant sky. But here's the thing about Mace Windu. He didn't die. And that changed everything. What if the most dangerous Jedi Council member survived Order 66? What if the master of the most aggressive lightsaber form was still out there when the clones turned? What if the one Jedi who had beaten Palpatine in combat lived to fight another day? The Empire's worst nightmare just became real. The lightning tore through him. White-hot agony, every nerve on fire. His hand, severed by his own deflected blade, courtesy of Anakin's betrayal, tumbled away, still gripping his purple lightsaber. Then came the fall. 4,000 levels straight down. Wind screaming, city lights blurring into streaks. This should have been the end. But Mace Windu was not ready to die. Not when Palpatine still drew breath. Not when the Sith had just claimed victory. Not when Anakin Skywalker had chosen darkness over light. Through the pain, through the disorientation of freefall, Windu reached deep into the Force. His connection flickered, weakened by the dark side lightning that had ravaged his body. But it was still there. It had always been there. Even when he had walked closest to the darkness through his mastery of Vapad. He pulled at the Force now, not with the controlled precision he had spent decades perfecting, but with raw desperation. The Force responded. His descent began to slow, not dramatically, but enough. Enough that when he crashed through the canopy of a landing platform in the industrial sector, 4,000 levels below the Senate district, the impact shattered bones instead of pulverizing his entire body. He tumbled across Ferrocrete, leaving a trail of blood, finally coming to rest against a cargo container. His vision swam, darkness creeping in at the edges. Pain radiated from what felt like everywhere. But his Jedi training kicked in, compartmentalizing, assessing, surviving. His right hand was gone, severed by his own deflected lightsaber courtesy of Anakin Skywalker's betrayal. Burns covered much of his body from Palpatine's Force lightning. Several ribs were broken from the impact. His left leg was fractured. But he was alive. Impossibly, improbably alive. Windu forced himself to focus, to reach into the Force and begin the healing trance that might keep him that way. But even as he did, something else rippled through the Force, something that made his breath catch despite his injuries. A disturbance. No, not a disturbance. A massacre. Across the galaxy, lights were winking out in the Force. Jedi, hundreds of them, thousands. Windu gasped, the psychic shock of so many deaths nearly overwhelming his already weakened state. They were dying, all of them. Cut down not in glorious battle, but suddenly, unexpectedly, by those they trusted most. The clones. The clone troopers were killing the Jedi. Windu's mind reeled. It was Palpatine's final move. The contingency he had been planning all along. The war, the clones, everything had been orchestrated for this moment. And Windu had failed to stop it. He had been so close, his blade at the Sith Lord's throat, justice within reach. But Anakin had chosen. The boy he had never quite trusted. The boy Qui-Gon Jinn had insisted was the chosen one, had chosen the dark side. Rage flooded through Windu, hot and intoxicating. Vapad had always required him to channel his inner darkness, to ride the edge of the abyss without falling in. Now, broken and beaten, feeling the death of his order through the Force, that edge seemed very far away. He wanted to kill Anakin Skywalker. He wanted to return to that office tower and finish what he had started with Palpatine, regardless of the cost. The dark side whispered to him, promising strength, promising vengeance. But Mace Windu had not become a master of the Jedi Order by giving in to such impulses. With iron discipline forged over decades, he pushed the rage down, not away, never away. That was not the way of Vapad. But down, contained, controlled. He would use it later. Right now, he needed to survive. He reached deeper into the Force, initiating the healing trance despite the screaming agony it caused. His consciousness began to fade, his body instinctively prioritizing the worst of the damage. The last thing he was aware of before darkness took him was the sound of clone trooper boots on metal. Searching, always searching. When Mace Windu woke, it was to the acrid smell of the Coruscant Undercity and the sound of distant sirens. He had no idea how long he had been unconscious. Hours at least, possibly days. His body felt like it had been thrown into a fusion furnace. But the Force had done its work. The broken bones had begun to knit, the burns had scabbed over, and most importantly, he was conscious and capable of movement. He forced himself to sit up, biting back a groan, and assessed his situation. The landing platform was abandoned, at least for the moment. His Jedi robes were burned and blood-stained, marking him as clearly as a beacon. He needed to change that. Using the cargo container for support, Windu pulled himself to his feet, swaying slightly as a wave of dizziness passed through him. His right arm ended in a cauterized stump just below the elbow. His lightsaber was gone, lost somewhere in the kilometers of air between Palpatine's office and this platform. He was unarmed, injured, and marked for death. But he was Mace Windu. He had fought in the Clone Wars, had led armies, had faced down Sith and worse. He was not helpless. He reached out with the Force, searching for anything useful. There, in a nearby maintenance locker, workers' coveralls and tools. It would have to do. Moving slowly, every step an exercise in controlled agony, Windu made his way to the locker. The coveralls were too large, but they hid his distinctive appearance. He fashioned a crude sling for his damaged arm using strips torn from his Jedi robes, then discarded the robes themselves into a waste compactor. As he worked, his mind was racing. The Jedi were being hunted, that much was clear from the deaths he had felt through the Force. Palpatine would be consolidating his power, transforming the Republic into something else, something darker. The clones, somehow, were under his control. Were they all compromised? Had they always been? Or was this something Palpatine had triggered, some failsafe built into the clone army from the beginning? That last thought chilled Windu more than he wanted to admit. If the clones had been programmed from their creation on Kamino, then this conspiracy went back years, perhaps even before the Clone Wars had begun. The Jedi had been played, utterly and completely. They had led an army that was designed to betray them, had trusted in a Senate that was controlled by a Sith Lord, had believed they were fighting for peace when they were actually ensuring their own destruction. The scope of the betrayal was staggering. Windu felt the rage building again and ruthlessly suppressed it. Rage could come later. Right now, he needed information. He needed to understand what had happened, what was happening, and what would happen next. He limped toward a public information terminal at the edge of the platform, trying to appear like just another injured worker in Coruscant's industrial sectors, where injuries were common and questions were rare. The terminal's holoscreen came to life at his touch, and what he saw confirmed his worst fears. The Galactic Republic was no more. In its place stood the Galactic Empire, with Palpatine declaring himself Emperor. The Jedi were declared traitors, enemies of the state, accused of attempting to assassinate the Supreme Chancellor and overthrow the Republic. There were images of the Jedi Temple, burning, images of Jedi being gunned down by clone troopers. And there, prominently featured in the propaganda, was the hero who had stopped the Jedi plot, the newly anointed Darth Vader. Windu stared at the image of Anakin Skywalker, clad in dark robes, kneeling before Palpatine. The boy's eyes were golden, touched by the dark side, filled with a fury that Windu recognized all too well. So Anakin had not merely chosen the dark side in a moment of weakness. He had fully embraced it, had become Palpatine's apprentice, had helped slaughter the Jedi. The rage that Windu had been suppressing threatened to break free. His vision tunneled, and for a moment, the dark side sang to him with crystal clarity. Kill him. Hunt him down and kill him. Make him pay for his betrayal. Show him the true meaning of power. These thoughts were not entirely his own, Windu knew. They were the dark side, amplified by Vapad, by his proximity to that edge he had walked for so long. But they were also his thoughts, his feelings, his desire. He wanted vengeance. By the Force, he wanted it more than he had wanted anything in his life. A squad of clone troopers marched past the platform, and Windu instinctively pulled back into the shadows, his hand reaching for a lightsaber that was no longer there. The troopers did not notice him, intent on their patrol route. Windu watched them go, studying them through the Force. There was something wrong with them, something mechanical and cold in the way they moved through the Force. It was subtle, but to a Jedi Master, it was noticeable. They were not acting of their own free will. They were following orders, but not in the way soldiers normally followed orders. This was something else, something programmed. Windu needed to know more. He needed to understand what had been done to the clones. If they were victims, then his rage at them was misdirected. The true enemy was Palpatine, always Palpatine, and Vader, especially Vader. But Windu could not face either of them in his current state. He was injured, unarmed, and cut off from the Jedi Order. He needed time to heal, to plan, to prepare. And he needed allies. The question was, where could he find them? The Jedi were scattered, those few who had survived the initial purge. Windu could feel them through the Force, distant lights in the darkness, hiding, fleeing, dying one by one as the Empire's hunters found them. He could try to reach out to them, but that risked exposing both himself and them. The Force could be monitored, he knew now. Palpatine had hidden his presence for years. The Sith clearly had techniques for masking themselves and potentially for detecting others. There were other options. Senators who had opposed Palpatine's emergency powers, who had tried to preserve the Republic. Bail Organa of Alderaan came immediately to mind. The senator had been a friend to the Jedi, had worked closely with them throughout the war. But approaching him was risky. Palpatine would be watching the known Jedi sympathizers, waiting for survivors to make contact. Windu would have to be careful, deliberate, patient. Qualities that did not come easily to him at the best of times, and these were far from the best of times. For now, he needed to disappear. The Coruscant Undercity was vast, a labyrinth of industrial sectors, residential slums, and forgotten infrastructure that stretched for miles beneath the gleaming towers of the Senate District. People disappeared here all the time, swallowed by crime, poverty, and indifference. Windu could use that. He could become one of the invisible masses, another scarred worker ground down by the machine of the galaxy's capital world. But he would need resources. Credits, medical supplies, and eventually, a new lightsaber. The last would be the most difficult. Kyber crystals were rare, and most of the Jedi's stores were in the temple, which was now firmly under Imperial control. He would have to find another source, or perhaps steal one from a fallen Jedi or an Inquisitor. The thought brought him up short. Inquisitors. He had heard rumors during the War of Dark Side adepts being trained in secret. If those rumors were true, they would be Palpatine's hunters now. Force-sensitive enforcers designed to track down and eliminate surviving Jedi. Windu had fought dark side users before, had even trained specifically to counter them through his development of Va-Pad. But in his current state, weakened and unarmed, even a lesser dark side adept could pose a serious threat. He needed to disappear completely, to hide his presence in the Force so thoroughly that even Palpatine himself would not sense him. It was possible. Difficult, but possible. He had studied the techniques the Jedi used to shield themselves, had even developed some of his own methods. Now he would need to employ them to their fullest extent. He descended deeper into the Undercity, following maintenance tunnels and abandoned transit lines, moving slowly to conserve his strength and avoid drawing attention. The further down he went, the darker and more dangerous it became. But also the less likely he was to encounter Imperial patrols. The Empire cared little for the depths of Coruscant, as long as the crime lords down here kept their activities from spilling up into the respectable levels. Eventually, Windu found what he was looking for. A small, abandoned maintenance station that had once served the water purification systems. It was dry, relatively defensible, and had multiple exits. Most importantly, it showed no signs of recent habitation. He sealed himself inside and finally allowed himself to fully assess the damage. The burns from Palpatine's Force lightning were healing but would leave scars. His right arm would need a prosthetic eventually. But for now, he would have to adapt to fighting one-handed. His broken ribs and fractured leg were knitting back together through the Force. But full healing would take weeks, perhaps months. He settled into a meditation pose, ignoring the pain, and began the deep healing trance that would accelerate his recovery. But even as he sank into the Force, he maintained awareness of his surroundings, a technique he had perfected over years of warfare. Jedi might be known as peacekeepers, but Mace Windu had long ago accepted that sometimes peace could only be achieved through strength, through the willingness to do what was necessary. That philosophy had led him to develop Va-Pad, to walk the edge of the dark side in pursuit of victory over it. Now, alone in the darkness beneath Coruscant, Mace Windu wondered if he had been wrong. Perhaps his willingness to embrace the darkness, even in controlled measure, had blinded him to the greater darkness of Palpatine's plot. Perhaps the Jedi Order's involvement in the war, their willingness to become generals and commanders, had been their downfall. These were questions that had no easy answers. Questions that had been debated by wiser Jedi than himself over the millennia. But they were questions he would have to grapple with if he was to survive, and more importantly, if he was to find a way to strike back against the Empire. Days passed in that abandoned station. Windu emerged only to scavenge food and water from the Undercity markets, always careful to mask his Force presence, to appear as just another desperate soul trying to survive in the depths. He heard news of the Empire's consolidation, of Jedi being hunted down across the galaxy, of worlds brought to heel under Imperial law. Each report fueled the fire of his anger. But he remained disciplined, focused on his healing and his planning. It was on the 5th day that everything changed. Windu had ventured out to a black market medical supply dealer, hoping to acquire antibiotics and Bacta-patches for his injuries. He had credits, taken from the maintenance station's emergency supply locker, enough to make small purchases without drawing attention. But as he approached the dealer's stall, he felt something in the Force. A presence, cold and mechanical, similar to what he had sensed from the clone patrols, but more intense. Windu immediately pulled back, melding into the crowd of Undercity dwellers. He extended his senses carefully, trying to locate the source of that wrongness. There, a clone trooper, but not part of a standard patrol. This one moved differently, with more purpose, more awareness. And there was something about his Force presence, or rather, the lack of it. It was as if the trooper was moving through life in a dream, following commands that he did not fully understand. Windu made a decision. He needed to know what had been done to the clones, needed to understand the mechanism of the betrayal. And this trooper, separated from his unit, presented an opportunity. It was risky, but everything was risky now. He followed the trooper through the Undercity, staying well back, using his limited Force abilities to remain unnoticed. The trooper eventually entered a small cantina, clearly off-duty or on a break from whatever mission had brought him to the depths. This was Windu's chance. He entered the cantina several minutes later, taking a seat at the bar where he could observe the trooper without being obvious about it. The clone was drinking alone, his helmet on the table beside him, staring at nothing in particular. Up close, Windu could sense the wrongness more clearly. There was something in the trooper's head, something artificial, something that was interfering with his natural connection to the Force. All living things had some connection to the Force, even if they could not actively use it. But this trooper's connection was muted, filtered through whatever had been done to him. Windu waited until the trooper got up to use the refresher, then followed. The facility was empty, dingy, and poorly lit. Perfect. As the trooper emerged from a stall, Windu was there, his hand coming up to touch the man's temple before the clone could react. It was a technique he had rarely used, a Force ability that allowed him to sift through memories and thoughts, usually considered too invasive by the Jedi Council for regular use. But these were not regular times. What Windu saw in that trooper's mind horrified him. There was a chip, a biological control device implanted in every clone's brain, designed to override their free will when a specific command was given. Order 66, execute the Jedi. The clones had not betrayed them by choice. They had been programmed from birth, sleeper agents waiting for activation. The betrayal went back to Kamino, to the very creation of the clone army. The Sith had been planning this for over a decade. The trooper collapsed as Windu withdrew from his mind. The Jedi Master caught him before he hit the ground, easing him down. The man was alive but unconscious, his mind overwhelmed by the intrusion. Windu stared at him, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Rage at the Sith for such a monstrous manipulation. Pity for the clones, bred and programmed to be slaves. And guilt. Guilt that the Jedi had used these men, had sent them into battle, had trusted them, never knowing that they were weapons pointed at the Order's heart. He could not leave the trooper like this. The chip was still active, still controlling him. If Windu did nothing, the man would wake up and resume his mission, hunting Jedi with no will of his own. But removing the chip, that would require surgery, equipment, expertise that Windu did not have access to. Still, he had to try something. He reached out with the Force, not into the trooper's mind this time, but into the chip itself. It was a delicate procedure, one he had never attempted before. But his control of the Force was precise, honed by years of Vapad training. The chip was organic technology, grown as much as built, integrated into the clone's brain tissue in a way that made removal difficult but not impossible. Windu focused, using the Force to disrupt the chip's connections, to sever its control over the trooper's higher functions. It was exhausting work, requiring a level of concentration that made his head pound. But gradually, he felt the chip's grip loosen. It was not a complete removal. The chip was still there. Still potentially functional, but it was no longer actively controlling the trooper. Windu withdrew, gasping slightly from the effort. He checked the trooper's vital signs. Stable. The man would wake soon, possibly with a splitting headache, but alive and, hopefully, in control of his own mind. Windu could not stay to see the result. He had already spent too long in one place, taken too great a risk. He exited the refresher, moving quickly through the cantina and back out into the undercity streets. But the encounter had changed something in Windu. He now understood the nature of the betrayal, understood that the clones were victims as much as perpetrators. It complicated his feelings about the Empire, about who deserved his vengeance. Palpatine, certainly. Anakin, absolutely. But the clones? They were slaves, mind-controlled from birth. They deserved freedom, not punishment. This realization brought with it a new sense of purpose. Windu could not simply hide and heal, could not focus solely on revenge. If he was to truly oppose the Empire, he needed to think bigger. He needed to free the clones from their programming, needed to undermine the very foundation of the Emperor's power. It was a monumental task, one that would require allies, resources, and time. But it was the right task, the one that would honor the Jedi he had failed to save. The question now was how to begin. The knowledge he had gained from the trooper's mind included information about clone facilities, about Imperial bases, about the chain of command. But acting on that information alone would be suicide. He needed help. He needed the resources of the nascent rebellion, the senators and systems that opposed the Empire. He needed to contact Bail Organa. But he could not simply walk up to the senator's door. Organa would be watched, his communications monitored, his movements tracked. Windu would need to be clever, would need to use intermediaries and coded messages. Fortunately, the Jedi had established such protocols long ago. Emergency contact procedures designed for exactly this kind of scenario. Windu had never thought he would need to use them. But now they might be his only option. He spent the next several days preparing, stealing what equipment he needed from the undercity markets, establishing a secure location for communication, and carefully, very carefully, beginning to test the emergency protocols. The first few attempts yielded nothing, the contacts dead or compromised. But on the fourth try, he received a response. A simple acknowledgement, a time and place for a meeting. It was not from Organa directly, but from someone claiming to represent sympathetic senators. It could be a trap, probably was a trap. But Windu had no other options. The meeting was set for a neutral location, an abandoned warehouse in the industrial sector, far from both the Senate district and the Imperial Palace. Windu arrived early, scouting the location, searching for ambush points and escape routes. He found several of each. If this was a trap, he would not go quietly. He positioned himself in a shadowed alcove where he could observe the main entrance and waited. The contact arrived precisely on time. A young Twi'lek woman who moved with the careful efficiency of someone used to operating in dangerous spaces. She was not alone. 3 armed guards accompanied her, though they kept their weapons holstered. Windu watched through the force, analyzing their intentions. They were nervous, but not hostile. Alert, but not aggressive. Cautiously, he emerged from his hiding spot. The Twi'lek's eyes widened as she recognized him, or rather, as she recognized what he was. Even without his Jedi robes, there was something about Windu that marked him as different, as dangerous. She bowed slightly, a gesture of respect. Master Jedi, we had hoped someone from the Order had survived, but we did not dare believe it. Windu did not return the bow. Who are you? Who do you represent? My name is Fenra Ordo. I work for Senator Bail Organa of Alderaan, though I am not formally part of his staff. The senator has been organizing resistance to the Emperor's new regime, quietly gathering those who oppose what the Republic has become. When we received your signal, he sent me to make contact. He wants to help you, wants to help any Jedi who survived. Why? Windu's question was blunt, suspicious. What does Organa gain from sheltering fugitives of the Empire? Fenra met his gaze steadily. The senator believes that the Jedi were betrayed, that the accusations against your order are lies manufactured by Palpatine to consolidate his power. He believes that the Empire is a perversion of everything the Republic stood for. And he believes that the Jedi, or at least those who survived, could be crucial allies in opposing the Emperor. It was what Windu had hoped to hear, but he remained cautious. And if I am not interested in being an ally, if I have other plans, then we wish you luck and will provide what assistance we can before you go. Fenra's answer was simple, direct. But Master Jedi, forgive my bluntness, you are injured, unarmed, and alone. Whatever plans you have, they will go better with allies and resources. The senator can provide both. She was right, of course. Windu's pride rebelled against accepting help, against admitting that he could not face the Empire alone. But pride was a luxury he could not afford. He had failed once, had allowed his certainty and his focus on Palpatine to blind him to Anakin's fall. If he was to succeed now, he would need to be smarter, more flexible, more willing to work with others, even if it galled him. What does Organa want from me? Windu asked. Information, primarily. You were on the Jedi Council. You know things about the Clone Wars, about the Republic's military, about Palpatine himself that could be invaluable to the Resistance. Beyond that, he hopes that you might be willing to help coordinate the search for other Jedi survivors, to bring them into the network we are building. And eventually, when the time is right, to help lead the fight against the Empire. It was a reasonable request, but it also meant revealing himself, trusting people he did not know with the knowledge that a Jedi Master had survived. Every person who knew was a potential leak, a potential threat. But isolation was also a threat. Alone, Windu could accomplish little. With allies, with resources, he might actually make a difference. I will meet with Organa, Windu said finally, but not on Coruscant. Somewhere more secure, somewhere the Empire cannot easily reach. Fenra nodded. The senator anticipated this. He has a safe house on Alderaan, well hidden and well guarded. If you are willing, we can transport you there within the week. A week. It seemed like an eternity and an instant all at once. Windu considered the offer, weighed the risks, and made his decision. He needed allies, and Bail Organa was one of the few senators he had genuinely trusted before the fall. I will come, but I have conditions. Name them. First, I need medical supplies and a secure location to complete my healing before we travel. Second, I need information. Everything Organa has gathered about the Empire's structure, about the fate of other Jedi, about what happened at the temple. Third, I need materials for constructing a lightsaber. I am no good to anyone unarmed. Fenra considered this, then nodded. The first two should not be a problem. The third might take some time, but the senator has connections. We may be able to acquire what you need. Then we have an agreement. The Twi'lek bowed again. We will make the arrangements. There is a safe apartment 3 levels up from here in the residential district. It is clean, secure, and has medical facilities. My people will stock it with supplies and ensure it is not disturbed. You can stay there until we are ready to depart." She provided the address and access codes, then departed with her guards, leaving Windu alone in the warehouse. He waited several minutes, ensuring they were truly gone, then made his way to the apartment. It was exactly as described. Small, nondescript, but clean and well-equipped. A medical kit sat on the table, along with food, water, and fresh clothing. Windu checked the space thoroughly, searching for surveillance devices or traps, but found none. Either Organa's people were very good at hiding their espionage equipment, or they were genuinely offering help without strings attached. Time would tell which. For the next 5 days, Windu focused on healing. He used the Force to accelerate the process, meditating for hours at a time, knitting bone and tissue back together. He also began the process of adapting to the loss of his hand. Fighting one-handed would require adjustments to his technique, particularly for Form 7th. Vapad had always been an aggressive, unpredictable style, relying on rapid strikes and unconventional angles. He would need to maintain that unpredictability while compensating for the reduced reach and power of fighting with only one hand. He practiced in the apartment's small living space, going through the forms slowly at first, relearning balance and timing. It was frustrating work. Every movement that had once been instinctive now required conscious thought. But gradually, over days of repetition, new instincts began to form. He was not as fast as he had been, not as powerful, but he was adapting. He would never be the fighter he once was, but he could still be dangerous. That would have to be enough. On the evening of the 5th day, Fenra returned. She brought with her a package, carefully wrapped in cloth. "A gift from the senator," she said, handing it to Windu. He unwrapped it carefully and found himself staring at components for a lightsaber. The emitter, the focusing lens, the power cell, all the necessary pieces. And there, nestled in a protective case, was a kyber crystal, glowing with a faint purple light. It was not his original crystal that was lost forever, but it was attuned to the Force, waiting for a Jedi to claim it. "Where did Organa get this?" Windu asked, unable to keep the wonder from his voice. "He has his sources. Some of the Jedi Temple's outer vaults were accessible before the Empire locked everything down. A few items were recovered by sympathizers. This crystal, he has been saving it, hoping a survivor would need it." Fenra smiled slightly. "I think he will be glad to know it has found its way to you." Windu held the crystal in his palm, feeling its resonance with the Force. It sang to him, a clear note of light and power. Slowly, carefully, he began to construct his new weapon. The process was meditative, each component placed with precision, guided by the Force. The lightsaber that emerged was different from his old one, slightly longer, designed for one-handed use. But when he ignited it, the purple blade that sprang to life was achingly familiar, a piece of his identity restored. He deactivated the weapon and clipped it to his belt. He felt more complete now, more like himself. "Thank Organa for me," he said to Fenra. "This gift is beyond value. You can thank him yourself. We leave for Alderaan tomorrow." The journey to Alderaan was accomplished in stages, using a series of smuggler ships and false identities to avoid Imperial attention. Fenra's organization was clearly well practiced at moving people and cargo beneath the Empire's notice. Windu spent most of the trip in meditation, preparing himself for the meeting with Organa and for whatever role the Senator might ask him to play in the growing resistance. Alderaan itself was a beautiful world, All green mountains and blue seas, a paradise compared to the Ferrocrete canyons of Coruscant. Organa's safe house was located in the mountains, accessible only by airspeeder and well away from any major population centers. It was more of an estate than a house, clearly designed for both comfort and security. Windu was led to a sitting room where Bail Organa himself waited, dressed simply but still carrying himself with the dignity of his office. The senator stood as Windu entered, bowing deeply. "Master Windu, I cannot tell you how relieved I am to see you alive. When the reports came that you had been killed attempting to arrest the Chancellor, I feared the worst." "The reports were nearly accurate," Windu replied. "Palpatine proved more powerful than I anticipated, and he had help." He could not quite keep the bitterness from his voice when thinking of Anakin's betrayal. Organa gestured for him to sit. "Please, you must still be recovering from your injuries. Can I offer you anything? Food? Drink?" "Information," Windu said, sitting despite himself. "Fenra told me you have been gathering intelligence on the Empire. I need to know what happened after I fell, how extensive the purge was, how many Jedi survived." The senator's expression grew grim. "The news is not good, I'm afraid. The attack on the Jedi Temple was devastating. From what our sources inside the Imperial military report, the clones, led by Lord Vader himself, slaughtered everyone they found. Masters, knights, Padawans, even the younglings. No one was spared." Windu felt the force around him ripple with his anger. The younglings. Anakin had killed children. Whatever rationalization he had used to justify his fall to the dark side, whatever promises Palpatine had made him, nothing could excuse that. Nothing. Organa continued, not noticing or choosing to ignore Windu's reaction. Across the galaxy, the story was much the same. The clones turned on the Jedi without warning. Some masters managed to escape, but not many. We have confirmed reports of perhaps 20 survivors out of the entire order. 20 out of 10,000. 20. The number was almost incomprehensible. The Jedi Order, which had stood for 1,000 generations, reduced to a handful of fugitives in a matter of hours. Windu closed his eyes, reaching out through the Force, feeling for those distant lights. He could sense some of them, flickering and hidden, but alive. Obi-Wan Kenobi was one, he was sure of it. Yoda was another, his presence ancient and strong despite his small stature. But so many others were gone, their lights extinguished, their potential unfulfilled. "What of the clones?" Windu asked, opening his eyes. "What is the Empire doing with them now?" "They remain the backbone of the Imperial military, at least for now. The Emperor is also recruiting from the general population, creating a more traditional army. But the clones are still the most effective fighting force in the galaxy." "Why do you ask?" "Because they are not responsible for what they did." Windu explained what he had learned about the inhibitor chips, about the programming that had turned the clones into unwitting weapons. Organa listened with growing horror, his face pale by the time Windu finished. "This is monstrous," the senator whispered. "To create an army of slaves, to use them to destroy the Jedi, it is an evil beyond measure. These chips, can they be removed?" "It is possible. I managed to disrupt one, though I lack the skill and equipment to do so reliably. If we could gain access to the Kaminoan files, or capture a clone and properly study the chip, we might be able to develop a procedure. But it would take time, resources, and most critically, access to large numbers of clones without alerting the Empire to what we are doing." Organa leaned back in his chair, thinking. This could be the key to undermining the Empire's military power. If we could free the Sexa Damaz, clones, from their programming, They might turn against their masters. But you are right. The logistics are daunting. We would need to start small, with individual clones, perfect the procedure, and then find a way to scale it up. There is another problem, Windu said. Even if we remove the chips, the clones may not fight for us. They were bred and trained to be soldiers, to follow orders. Some might embrace their freedom and choose to fight the Empire. But others might simply lay down their weapons, or even continue to serve the Empire out of habit or misplaced loyalty. We cannot assume they will become instant allies. Then we will need to be prepared for that possibility. Still, any reduction in the Empire's military capability is a victory, and freeing even a portion of the clones from their enslavement is the right thing to do, regardless of the strategic implications. Windu found himself nodding. He had not expected such a principled stance from a politician. But Organa had always been different, had always placed ideals above expediency. It was why the Jedi had trusted him during the war. It was why Windu was willing to trust him now. There is something else we need to discuss, Organa said, his tone shifting. Master Yoda. I was able to get him off Coruscant before the Empire locked down the planet. He is in hiding, but he asked me to give you a message if you survived. Windu straightened. Yoda lives. Where is he? Somewhere safe. He was quite insistent that his location remain secret, even from other Jedi. He fears that the Emperor might be able to track surviving Jedi through their connections in the Force. But he wanted you to know that he is working on a long-term plan, something that will take years, perhaps decades, to come to fruition. He asked that you trust in the Force and focus on the immediate fight against the Empire. He said you would understand. Windu did understand. Yoda was thinking in terms of generations, in terms of rebuilding the Jedi Order slowly and carefully, hidden from the Empire's sight. It was the wise course, the patient course. But it was not Windu's course. He did not have decades to wait. The Empire was consolidating its power now, enslaving worlds now, hunting Jedi now. Every day that passed allowed Palpatine to dig his claws deeper into the galaxy. I respect Master Yoda's plan, Windu said carefully. But I will not sit idly by while the Empire tightens its grip. If Organa is building a resistance, I want to be part of it. I want to strike back. The senator smiled grimly. I had hoped you would say that. But Master Windu, you must understand, this will not be the kind of war you fought before. There will be no glorious battles, no armies clashing on open fields. This will be a war fought in shadows, with sabotage and intelligence and careful subversion. It will require patience and subtlety, qualities that, forgive me for saying, are not your greatest strengths. Windu could not argue with that assessment. He had always been a direct fighter, a warrior who faced his enemies head-on. Vaapad itself was a reflection of that philosophy, aggressive and uncompromising. But he was willing to learn, willing to adapt. He had to be. Then teach me, Windu said. Show me how to fight this new war. I will follow your lead in this, Senator, at least until I have learned the terrain. But I will not be passive. I will find ways to hurt the Empire, to undermine its power, to prepare for the day when we can openly challenge it. Organa studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Very well. We will start with intelligence gathering. I need you to help me understand the Empire's command structure, particularly its military leadership. You worked closely with the clones during the war. You know their commanders, their tactics, their loyalties. That knowledge will be invaluable as we plan our operations. Over the following weeks, Windu worked closely with Organa's growing network of resistance operatives. He provided detailed briefings on the clone commanders he had worked with, identifying those who might be susceptible to having their inhibitor chips removed, those who might resist the Empire if given the chance. He helped plan intelligence operations, using his knowledge of Jedi techniques to advise on how to avoid detection by Force-sensitive Imperial agents. And he trained. Every day, he spent hours practicing with his new lightsaber, adapting to his injury, pushing his body to compensate for what he had lost. He also began to explore the darker edges of his connection to the Force. Vapad had always required him to channel his inner darkness. But now, surrounded by the ashes of the Jedi Order, feeling the weight of his failure, that darkness was stronger than it had ever been. He walked a dangerous line, using that darkness to fuel his strength while trying not to let it consume him. It was during one of these training sessions that he felt it, a presence in the Force that made his blood run cold. Vader, Anakin Skywalker, now Darth Vader, was on Alderaan. The dark side rolled off him like a wave, twisted and furious, searching for something or someone. Windu immediately suppressed his own presence, pulling his Force signature in tight, making himself as small and unnoticeable as possible. He reached out carefully, trying to understand what had brought Vader here. The Dark Lord was not alone. He was leading a detachment of clones, and they were raiding suspected rebel safe houses. Organa's network was being compromised. Had someone talked? Had they been traced? It did not matter. What mattered was that Vader was close, too close, and if he sensed Windu, the entire safe house would be in danger. Windu found Organa and explained the situation in clipped, urgent tones. The senator went pale, but did not panic. "We have emergency evacuation protocols. If you can buy us time, we can get everyone out through the mountain tunnels. But Master Windu, if Vader is here for you, if he somehow knows you survived, running may not be enough." "He is not here for me specifically," Windu said, his certainty born from his read of Vader's presence in the Force. "He is searching, hunting anyone connected to the Resistance. But if I engage him, he will know a Jedi is here. The question is whether that knowledge is worth the cost of revealing myself. Can you defeat him?" Windu considered the question honestly. Vader was powerful, saturated in the dark side in a way that even Palpatine had not been during their fight. But he was also recently turned, still learning to wield his power, still raw and undisciplined. And Windu was a master of Vapad, uniquely suited to fighting dark side users. If they fought, it would be close. Dangerously close. "I do not know," Windu admitted. "But if the choice is between fighting him and letting him slaughter your people, I will fight." Organa gripped his shoulder. "Then I will trust your judgment, Master Jedi. May the Force be with you." Windu made his way down the mountain, following the pull of Vader's presence. He found the Dark Lord in a small village, interrogating locals about rebel sympathizers. Bodies littered the streets, civilians who had been too slow to answer or had given the wrong answers. The sight filled Windu with cold fury. This was what Anakin had become, a monster who killed innocents without hesitation. He stepped out into the open, his hand resting on his lightsaber but not yet drawing it. "Vader?" he called out, his voice carrying across the village square. "I am here. Let these people go." The Dark Lord turned, his masked face inscrutable. When he spoke, his voice was deep and mechanized, barely recognizable as Anakin's. "Master Windu, I wondered if any of the Council had survived. I am pleased. It means I can finish what should have been done that day in Palpatine's office." "You mean the day you betrayed everything the Jedi Order stood for?" The day you chose power over righteousness? Windu's hand tightened on his lightsaber hilt. I should have sensed your fall then. I should have struck you down. You tried, Vader said, and there was dark amusement in his tone. You failed. You have always underestimated me, Master Windu. Even now, crippled and broken, you think you can stand against me. You cannot. You and the rest of the Council were too weak, too bound by your precious code to do what was necessary. I have moved beyond such limitations. You have fallen to the dark side, Skywalker. There is nothing beyond about it. You are a slave now, just like the clones, just like everyone else under the Empire's heel. The only difference is that you chose your chains. Vader's anger flared in the Force, hot and violent. I chose power. I chose the strength to save those I love, something the Jedi could never give me. And I will use that power to scour you and every last survivor of your failed order from the galaxy. He ignited his lightsaber, the crimson blade, a stark contrast to the twilight sky. The clone troopers moved to support him, raising their weapons. But Vader waved them back. This one is mine. See to the evacuation of the town. I want every potential rebel sympathizer rounded up. The clones obeyed without question, and Windu felt a surge of pity for them even as he prepared to fight. They were slaves to their programming, just as Vader claimed to have freed himself but had become a slave to the dark side. The entire Empire was built on chains, on domination and control. It had to be stopped. Windu drew his lightsaber, the purple blade springing to life. Then come, Skywalker. Let us finish what was started. They crashed together in a fury of light and sound. Vader fought with raw power, his strikes heavy and brutal, the dark side fueling his strength beyond what his natural ability would allow. But Windu was faster, more precise. His one-handed style adapted to flow around Vader's attacks, rather than meeting them head-on. Vayapad sang in his mind, reflecting Vader's darkness back at him, creating a feedback loop of aggression and power. They fought through the village square, their blades carving trails of light in the growing darkness. Vader was strong, incredibly strong, but he was also angry, undisciplined, letting his rage drive him rather than controlling it. Windu had spent his entire life learning to master the edge between light and dark. He used that mastery now, letting Vader's fury crash against him while he waited for openings. But even as he fought, Windu could feel the toll the battle was taking. He was not fully healed from his injuries, and fighting one-handed was exhausting in a way his old style had never been. Vader, by contrast, seemed inexhaustible, drawing on the dark side without limit or care for the cost. If this fight went on too long, Windu would lose. He needed to end it quickly. He changed tactics, going on the offensive, using Vapad's unpredictability to throw Vader off balance. He feinted high, struck low, spun and reversed, each movement flowing into the next without pause or warning. Vader blocked, barely, his defense crude but effective through sheer power. They locked blades, pressing against each other, and for a moment, they were face to mask, close enough that Windu could sense the twisted, agonized presence beneath Vader's armor. "You are in pain," Windu said, surprised by the realization. "Palpatine hurt you, scarred you. This armor, it is not just protection. It is a prison." "Silence!" Vader shoved him back with a burst of Force power, sending Windu skidding across the cobblestones. "You know nothing of what I have sacrificed, what I have gained." But Windu did know. He could see it clearly now through the Force. Anakin had been burned, horribly burned, likely in a fight with Obi-Wan, if the emotional resonance was any indication. The suit was keeping him alive, but it was also limiting him. a constant reminder of his failures and his dependence on the Emperor. Vader was not the all-powerful Dark Lord he pretended to be. He was a broken man, held together by machines and hatred. This realization gave Windu hope. Vader could be beaten, could potentially even be redeemed, though that last seemed unlikely given the atrocities he had already committed. But more immediately, it meant Vader had weaknesses, vulnerabilities that could be exploited. The armor's controls, for instance, or the breathing apparatus. A precise strike could end this fight decisively. But as Windu prepared to press his advantage, he felt something else through the Force. More Imperial forces approaching, drawn by the sounds of battle. And among them, other Force presences, dark and hungry, Inquisitors. If he stayed to fight Vader, he would be overwhelmed by numbers. He had to retreat. It galled him to run, to leave Vader alive when he had the Emperor's apprentice at his mercy. But tactical retreat was not cowardice. It was wisdom. He would have other chances to face Vader. For now, survival was more important. Windu disengaged, leaping backwards and calling on the Force to enhance his jump, carrying him up onto a rooftop. Vader tried to follow, but his armor made him slower, less agile. By the time the Dark Lord reached the roof, Windu was 2 buildings away and still moving. He heard Vader's mechanized roar of frustration, but did not slow. He vanished into the mountains, trusting in the Force to guide him back to the safe house. When he arrived, he found the evacuation nearly complete. Organa was waiting for him, anxious but relieved when Windu appeared. "Did you kill him?" "No. He is too strong, and he had reinforcements coming. But I learned something important. Vader is powerful but not invincible. His armor is a weakness, and he is consumed by pain and anger, which makes him unpredictable but also exploitable. Will he track us here? Possibly. We should evacuate immediately and not return to this location. Vader knows now that there is at least one Jedi working with the Resistance. That will make his hunt more focused." Organa nodded grimly. "Then we will scatter to our backup locations. Master Windu, I think it is time for you to consider going deeper into hiding. Your presence draws attention we cannot afford." Windu wanted to argue, but he knew Organa was right. As long as he was actively involved in the Resistance, he was a target, and his presence put everyone around him in danger. But he could not simply vanish, could not abandon the fight when it was just beginning. "I will hide," he said slowly, "but I will not be idle. Give me a ship, supplies, and access to your intelligence network. I will hunt the Empire's agents, disrupt their operations, and when possible, free clones from their programming. I will be a ghost, a rumor, something the Empire fears but cannot pin down." "A one-man insurgency," Organa said thoughtfully. "It is risky, but it might work." "Very well, Master Windu. I will provide what you need. But please be careful. The galaxy has already lost too many Jedi. We cannot afford to lose you as well." Windu clasped the senator's hand. "I will be as careful as I can be while still being effective. Thank you, Organa, for your help, for your belief in the Jedi. We will not forget it." Over the following months, Mace Windu became exactly what he had promised. A ghost haunting the Empire. Operating from a small, nondescript ship that Organa had provided, he moved from system to system, targeting Imperial operations with surgical precision. He freed clones from their inhibitor chips where he could, aided by a medical droid programmed with the procedure he had developed. Some of the freed clones joined him, forming a small team of operatives. Others simply vanished into the galactic underworld, seeking lives away from war. He also began hunting Inquisitors, These dark side adepts were less powerful than Vader, but still dangerous, and they were the Empire's primary weapon against surviving Jedi. Each Inquisitor he eliminated was one less hunter stalking his former brothers and sisters. It was dangerous work. The Inquisitors were trained specifically to hunt and kill Force users, and they often worked in pairs or groups. But Windu had the advantage of experience, of training, and of his mastery of Viapod. He used the Inquisitors' own darkness against them, turning their aggression into their undoing. Word began to spread through the Imperial ranks of a Jedi who had survived, a warrior who struck without warning and disappeared without a trace. Some called him a myth, a story told by rebels to frighten Imperial troops. Others claimed he was a demon, a vengeful spirit brought back from death by the Force itself. The truth, as always, was more mundane but no less remarkable. Mace Windu was simply a man who had failed once and was determined never to fail again. He also began to make contact with other Jedi survivors, those who had gone into hiding after Order 66. Most were reluctant to come out of hiding, traumatized by the betrayal and the slaughter of their order. But a few were willing to join the fight, to strike back against the Empire even knowing the risks. Slowly, carefully, Windu began to build a network of resistance fighters, a shadow of the Jedi Order that might one day grow into something more. Through it all, he struggled with the dark side. Every fight, every kill, every moment of rage and vengeance pulled him closer to the abyss that had claimed Anakin. There were nights when he meditated and felt the darkness inside him growing, threatening to overwhelm his discipline. Viapod had always required balance, had always required him to walk the edge without falling. But now, alone and surrounded by enemies, that edge was razor thin. He thought often of Yoda's message, of the Grand Master's plan to rebuild the Jedi slowly and carefully, away from the conflict. Part of Windu understood the wisdom in that approach. But another part, the part that had been shaped by war and betrayal, could not accept it. The Jedi had been passive for too long, had allowed corruption to grow in the Republic while they served as peacekeepers and diplomats. That passivity had led to their destruction. Windu would not make the same mistake. He would fight, would strike back, would show the Empire that the Jedi were not so easily destroyed. But in his quieter moments, he wondered if he was becoming the very thing he fought against. Was he still a Jedi? Or had he become something else, something darker? He did not have an answer to that question. Perhaps he never would. All he knew was that the Empire had to be stopped, that Palpatine and Vader had to pay for what they had done, and that he would dedicate whatever life he had left to making that happen. Years passed. The Empire consolidated its control over the galaxy, crushing resistance wherever it arose. But in the shadows, Windu and his network continued their work, a thorn in the Emperor's side, a reminder that the Jedi were not yet extinct. He knew he could not win this war alone, that eventually the Empire's resources would overwhelm him. But he could buy time, could create opportunities for others to rise up, could keep the flame of resistance alive until a new generation was ready to take up the fight. He had failed once in Palpatine's office, when he had hesitated and trusted in Anakin's loyalty. He would not fail again. Mace Windu would fight until his dying breath, would ensure that the Jedi Order's legacy was not one of passive victims, but of warriors who had fought to their last against the darkness. And perhaps, just perhaps, that would be enough.